Sunday Baroque Conversations is made possible by the Friends of Sunday Baroque and is produced at WSHU Public Radio in Fairfield, Connecticut. I'm Suzanne Bona. Thank you for listening. Don't miss an episode of Sunday Baroque Conversations. Subscribe on Apple or wherever you get your podcasts. And please leave us a review. If you want to find out where you can listen to our weekly show, visit our website, sundaybaroque.org, for a station list and our 24/7 stream. Again, that's sundaybaroque.org. Award-winning American tenor Frederick Ballentine is an opera star. This season alone, his calendar has gigs with Seattle Opera, Washington National Opera, and New York's Metropolitan Opera. Frederick Ballentine's repertory ranges from the most beloved classic opera to world premieres of new works. The Norfolk, Virginia native's training ground included Wolf Trap Opera, Aspen Music Opera Center, and the Opera Theater of St. Louis. Frederick Ballentine joins me on Zoom to talk about his life in music. Hi, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for that introduction.
What a pleasure to meet you finally after hearing so much about you. I'd like to go right back to the beginning, if you don't mind, and I'd like to hear about your start in music.
Oh, yes, of course. So I wouldn't say that I grew up with a musical family at all. We had a lot of music in the house, of course. My parents loved listening to gospel. My father was listening to Al Green at all times. To this day, I bet I have listened to every Al Green song that there is. So music was a part of the family, but we weren't necessarily a musical family. But my family did realize that I could sing because Al Green was present and everyone had to sing along. So they realized I could sing. They put me in a boys' choir when I was younger. And when it was time for me to go to high school, the choir director of the boys' choir reached out to my mom and suggested that I audition for a performing arts high school in my area called the Governor School for the Arts. Back then, I was a little boy soprano. Um, I thought singing was fun, but it's not what I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to become a lawyer.
Mm.
But, my mom still made me throw on a suit one day and she dragged me down to this audition. And I sung in front of two men who were very influential in my life, Alan Fisher and Robert Brown. And I remember I sang for them. And a bit of a funny story. I was a very honest and naive kid. I never said anything that was purposefully negative. However, it was always quite blunt because I had no filter growing up. And I sang, and I think it was Mr. Brown asked me, so Freddie, why do you want to come to the Governor's School for the Arts? And I said, I don't really. What is it? And he was like, we're a school that teaches singing. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Yeah, sure. And he goes, okay, well, then how do you think the Governor's School could help you to improve your singing? And I responded, I don't know how I could be any better than I already am. So can you? And I honestly, it wasn't, I was not full of myself at all. I thought that I knew I could sing well. I didn't think I was good enough to go to a school for it. And I had no idea you could take voice lessons. I never had a voice lesson.
Wow.
So they were like, yes, we actually can help you to improve your singing. We can give you a voice teacher. And I was like, oh, wow, that sounds cool. Yeah, sure. I would try that. And anyway, I started there. From day one, we only did opera. I had no
Wow.
idea what a score was. I could not read music,
Wow.
but being in that school was a huge blessing. I got an amazing grounding in all things opera. I walked into my undergraduate knowing more about opera than any of my classmates, thanks to Alan Fisher, who was a really well known in the community as knowing way too much about the art form.
Mm.
And yeah, it was an amazing school. We actually, several of my colleagues here at the Met, we were all in high school together at that school at the same time. Me and Speedo Green, Will
Oh,
Liverman, Crystal Williams,
wow.
Adam Richardson, Marjorie Owens. We were all there. It was an amazing, amazing grounding in the business. And from there, I went to University of Cincinnati for my undergraduate, and then Rice University in Houston for my master's.
My goodness. Wow. So at any point in along the way, did you also learn how to play an instrument?
You know what? I tried piano over and over and over, and I never had the focus to really learn how to pull it off. I learned how to play my parts very well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, I learned how to get away with some chord progressions and to maybe play a hymn in a hymnal if I was under duress. But no, I didn't pick up any other instruments outside of that.
Okay, okay, just curious. So you've mentioned two of the important figures, mentors, teachers, if you will, in your life. Are there any other people that you would really credit with being really important people, mentors, again, teachers, people who helped you
Yes, of
along the way?
course.
Hmm.
Of course. She's now passed. But Barbara Paver was my undergraduate voice teacher.
Yeah.
No, and, she was just one of the kindest people I've ever met. And
Mm-hmm.
um, I didn't have so much faith in my own singing as a kid. And when I was an undergrad, but Barbara never once had any doubt in my ability to be successful in this career. And I remember once I forgot what had happened. Uh, but I didn't know if I wanted to continue singing. And I went to Barbara and I went to her office one day. I think I was like a sophomore or junior, and I was like, Barbara, I don't know if this is what I should be doing. I don't like, do I really have a career voice? I'm very aware of how competitive this business here, if this business is this something I should do? And she says, Fred, I can't say to every student that I have that they can continue on this path, but you have a career voice and you have a career attitude. If this is something you want to do, you have everything it takes to pull it off.
Yeah.
Barbara, she just really meant a lot to me.
Mm.
I loved her so much. I think she was a huge influence for me. And another one, the one who I just brought up was Mr. Robert Brown, who to this day remains just probably the biggest figure in my memory. He was honestly the first openly gay man that I met.
Mm.
Um, Definitely the first openly gay black man that I knew, and I think I realized that before I even realized my own sexuality.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that so much of my personality ended up coming from Mr. Brown,
Mm.
his boisterousness, his buoyancy, the way he walks into a room. People are always commenting on the way that I move on stage and the way that I move in life. For lack of words, I strut everywhere I go, and I, it has to be Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown is the only person I know who also moved in that way with that type of gravitas. Whenever he walked into a room, I really attribute so much of myself from him as well.
Yeah. That's great, actually. People do refer to the, the particulars they learned about the craft of singing or whatever, music, learning an instrument. But I think you've really nailed it. I think that that is a huge thing that one needs to learn from a mentor and a teacher is how to
Yeah,
be in the world as someone who is a creative person. Yeah.
yeah, how to take up space, how to take up space. I mean, like that's not the space that I take up in the world is the same amount of space that I take up on stage.
Mm-hmm.
It's just exaggerated on stage.
Mm-hmm.
But I do realize that I got that from him, of course. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and then of course there are other people that I think I can attribute so much to the other ways that I am and how I perform. I the way I listen to music, I think I attribute to the videos I watch when I listen to Shirley Barrett. I've never seen somebody who can act the music as well as well, Callas. Callas can, of course, act the music. Oh my God, you watch Callas and she breathes exactly the
Yeah.
way that you would imagine that character would breathe. But I remember watching Shirley Barrett doing Lady Macbeth and just this woman walking across stage and just realizing that every step that she took in some way corresponded to what she was hearing from that orchestra. And then she stopped and she turned perfectly on beat. But it was nothing caricature about it. It was all in the character, but how it responded to the music. I learned a lot from watching her videos as well.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. That was she was at the top of the top.
Of course, yeah.
So you mentioned going to Barbara as a sophomore-ish or as an undergrad anyway, and having maybe some doubts, and she gave you a really amazing pep talk. Is that when you sort of knew in your heart of hearts that this is your life's work, or was there another moment that it really crystallized for you? What was that moment?
Um, it was opening night at the Met
Yeah,
when I did Sporting Life. I,
yeah.
as I said, I, I'm realistic. I am very realistic. I'm realistic to the plight of this business. I'm realistic to how competitive it is. I'm
Mhm.
realistic to who I am. I am very short and small for the man for the type of repertoire that I would like to sing on major stages. I know that I have a lot of things stacked against me, and and there's always that imposter syndrome that just always is right there in your head. And I know that people
Mhm.
don't see that. People are always surprised to hear that from me because I don't live my life that way. I don't let people know it. My best friends know, of course, but most people I
Mhm.
don't let know that I feel that way. So
Mhm.
that imposter syndrome is just was always there, and I always try to fight it off. But there was one day where I just did not need to fight it off, and it was me walking on the stage. It was me walking on the stage of the Met and realizing that I made my 10-year plan, like from back when I was 20. I said that I would sing on stage at the Met in a leading role by the time I was 30, and I did. And I was like,
Mm.
oh wow, you're doing fine. You're actually right on track. You are really, really good at this. This is something that you actually are definitely meant to do.
Oh, wow. Wow. So you have obviously an amazing career as an opera singer, but also you do, solo roles with orchestras like oratorios and that sort of thing. And then you do some chamber music as well. And those are really different activities. That's different demands as a singer, but also demands as a programmer. You get to pick the music and you work in a different dynamic with a collaborator. So how do those things compare and contrast? And maybe what do you like best? Or what do you like best about each of those things?
Mm. You know, yes, I love doing oratorio work. I love doing orchestral work as well because you get to shed all the layers of a character and just get to be the purest form of musician that you want to be on stage that sometimes you can't.
Mm,
Um, and of course, oratorio lends you that, and it's there's something so freeing about just being able to emote freely in front of an audience, just you standing there with the full orchestra
mhm.
behind you. However, when you get to do it in recital, it takes it to a whole nother level because there's nobody to answer to. There's no conductor there. It's just you and a collaborator and maybe a group of other musicians, and you all are just doing something that you all enjoy for an audience. And
Yeah.
I honestly think it's one of the most expressive ways that we as artists can perform. You all got together, you came up with the repertoire together, you found a venue together, you put in all of this hard work I mean, in producing something is extremely difficult. I don't do it more because of how difficult it is,
Yeah.
but it really I honestly think it's just the purest form of performing. It's just the purest form of putting your emotions, your mindset, your opinions out there in front of an audience and just wanting them to take that ride with you, to take a walk with you into your mind, into your heart.
So this is after that very profound thought. Maybe this is not profound enough to ask you, but how do you not only learn but memorize so much music? You're going through so many roles, especially when you're performing them in quick succession. How do you do that?
Oh my gosh, I don't know how I've always been if there is music attached to it, it's its own mnemonic device.
Hmm.
So the music itself is its own anchor for
Mm-hmm.
my brain, at least. I have many friends who aren't blessed with that skill music with the skill of tying music to words or absorbing that melody and holding on to it. But I've always been able to do that. I'm very lucky. I think a lot of it has to do with my upbringing because me because I've spoken with Will and Speedo and Crystal about this, and we all feel that we absorb music very quickly. But from the moment that we were 13, our teacher was throwing full operas at us,
Hmm.
like full operas. He would just hand us a CD and
Oh,
a score and say, "Hey, you have auditions on this next week. Be ready to sing this role." And I learned all of what's the name of Horace Tabor. I learned all of Horace Tabor in 2 days just with a CD and a score because I had an
wow.
audition on it in 2 days. And that was how we had to prepare for every opera that we did in high school. And so it's still how I learn my music. I just I jump on my Spotify, I sit there with my score, and I just go along. And I'm just very blessed to be able to absorb it
Mm,
very quickly.
mm.
I will say that was tested very thoroughly twice this season when I had to do Loga. And I did Loga in Rheingold with English National Opera. Sorry, not this season. It was last spring. And I've never been so stressed in my entire life. And with English National Opera, thankfully it was in English, so at least I didn't have to like try to memorize the translation of the German as well as the German itself. However, oh my gosh, I was glued to. I'm trying to remember who the conductor was. It's not coming to mind. Barenboim? I was just glued to this recording of Rheingold nonstop for at least 3 months. It's all that was playing as I was at the gym, as I was
Wow.
walking around, just trying to absorb all of the melodies. Loga is the most exciting character to play. He's so fun. He's so mischievous. It's just, I love that character so much. But my God, does he never shut up? It was non-stop.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I had to learn it in German after I did it in English. And again, I spent the entirety of the first half of the summer just listening nonstop, trying to memorize all of this text. But I have no secret to it other than I started while I was young. I started learning opera when I was very young, so I'm
Yeah.
I'm very blessed to be able to absorb it quickly now.
Yeah. Yeah. So you do a lot of the well-known operas, of course, but you also have done a number of world premieres. S- A whole different thing. You can't put that CD in. So how do you do
You are
that?
right.
And what's it like working with the composer on a brand new work?
Um, so in terms of memorization of new music, that is a little different, but not so much so.
Hmm.
I tend to I tend to take the score into a room. I will spend a lot of time intricately playing with intervals within the score
Hmm.
and also playing with the chord structure that's under me and trying to figure out if there's something in the chord structure that can help me at least. And once I have a grounding in that, which usually takes me, depending on the size of the role, um, anywhere from a week to a month. Once I have it grounded in that, then I'll start coaching it. I'll reach out to a pianist coach that I know and try to start going through the music with them.
Hmm.
I have a lot of friends who actually prefer to have a coach teach them the music.
Hmm.
Uh, I don't know why I have anxiety at the thought of it, but the idea of somebody seeing me in a weakened state of not knowing my music just sends me into a full spiral, and I cannot do that. I have
Mm.
to have a strong grounding in it before I can take it to a pianist coach.
Uh-huh.
And so after I've done that, I take it to my pianist coach. I'll try to work through it with them, and I also ask for them to play their part while I'm either trying to sing along to it or while playing the vocal line, so I can have something recorded. I'll record it, so I can
Mm.
have something recorded to help me tie onto the texture a little bit better.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and then your other question about working with the composer, uh, so fun. It's not scary at all. I feel like a lot of people work with composers and they're so nervous to be able to have to sing something that somebody has never done and to have the composer there. I think it's so freeing. It's
Hmm.
so much easier. You can walk in there, you can sing through something a few times, and if something doesn't respond with your voice, if something's just not clicking vocally, dramatically. You can go to the composer, and I've never had a composer give me problems with that. They'll
Sure.
go, "Oh, well, how do we make it shine for you?"
Hmm.
And they change it.
Oh,
we
wow.
we talk and we figure out how to make this the best product for everybody, and then you have an entirely new work in front of you that was made for you. That is, it's such an honor to have somebody write something with you in mind. I'm very grateful to have had that experience a few times now. I think one of my favorite times recently, that well, not recently, but oh, whoops, I think it was almost a decade ago now. We're aging. Um, but one of my favorite times was when I was doing Appomattox with Philip Glass at
Hmm.
Washington National Opera. It was my first principal contract. Um, and there was a line in a part of the opera that was usually just that was supposed to just be chorus, and there was a line in it that the chorus just didn't feel comfortable singing. Uh, and the director walked up to me and was like, "Hey, would you mind if we maybe like gave you an extra aria?" And I was like, "Why would I mind? Please give me another aria." And so I was chilling at home that night, and I got an email from Philip Glass himself, and he's like, "Hey, Freddie, here, what, can you just try to sing this tomorrow and see how you feel about it?" And I had a whole aria that was written for me by Philip Glass. He
Wow.
wrote it for me just like within the span of of an evening and sent it to me. Like that's the
Wow.
most exciting thing.
Wow, wow, wow. I'm so glad you brought up Appomattox too, because that was my next question. I wanted to talk. I mean, you played two roles as two heroic real life men, um, and I would love for you to talk a little bit about those roles and what it felt like to have those roles.
Yes, of course. I believe I'm trying to remember. Um, T. Morris Chester was one of the roles.
Right,
Or
and
is it
John
Morris
Lewis,
T. Chester?
T. Morris Chester,
And
yeah, the Black Civil
T.
War
Morris Chester.
correspondent, right,
Yes, it's
and
Black
John
Civil War
Lewis.
correspondent, and of course John Lewis.
Yeah.
Um, so I've done a few roles that were real people now, and that is an extremely daunting thing, I would say, because you have a responsibility to those people
Hmm.
to portray them as accurately as possible. Um, I didn't have so much material to go off of with Timor Chester. However, I did have his writings. I did understand the righteousness that he felt and what he did, and how intelligent and brave he had to be a black man doing what he was doing at that point in history. A Civil War correspondent during the Civil War, to be black, I can't even imagine the fear like that you would have to fear
Hmm.
uh, in at every moment of his life. And then, of course, John Lewis, who up until recently fought endlessly for the advancement of Black people. I I found it extremely daunting. I don't think I was ever so afraid as when John Lewis came to the show and I found out right before I walked on stage. I don't think I've ever been that freaked out, you know? Um, but I also felt a huge swell of pride to have the honor of portraying these men who had done so much for the advancement of Black people.
Hmm.
There is there is a huge weight on my shoulders when one has to portray something like that. But it is a great honor, and it gives you, and there is a great responsibility to it. So
Hmm.
I was extremely intimidated, but also so honored to have the opportunity to do so.
Hmm. And you received some pretty glowing critical praise for those both those roles as well.
Yes, yes, yeah, I did.
So, what else are you passionate about? What makes you tick?
Mm, this question. I think I'm a rather abnormal opera singer. I like to have a life. So many of us operas.
Good.
I when I'm in a production and the rehearsals are going on and I'm just sapped. I tend to be a homebody. I'll wake up. I go to the gym quite often, but I go to the gym. I go to rehearsal. I go home, and I also tend to be a little depressed. I get depressed when I leave home at first. It's hard for me to leave home. It's hard for me to leave my loved ones.
Mm-hmm.
It's the plight of the opera singer. We all have to deal with that aspect of what we do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, But once the show is open and I have more free time, I would say I am very much a social butterfly. I want to be out and about meeting people and seeing as many of my friends as I can because I am at heart a complete and total extrovert and I need people in order to find joy. If I'm not around people, then I am going to go and I'm just going to be sad. It's why I'm sad when I leave home.
Mm.
So New York has been great. I've loved being here and reconnecting with so many friends that I haven't seen in years just due to my living in Europe now, and of course the pandemic. It's that's been really beautiful for me. Outside of that, I tend to be I love going dancing. I am a very big techno and rave person when I have the opportunity to do so, which unfortunately isn't so often with our career. However, if I have the opportunity and go listen to some house music, to go to a festival and just bond with people I've never met in my entire life, that's something that will always get me going. It brings me a lot of joy.
That's great. So, what kind of wisdom would you share with the next Frederick Ballentine, the young and up and coming opera star?
Hmm, let's see. For the next Frederick Ballentine, I would have to tell him to stick to his guns and that his instincts are correct.
Mm.
I think that I can look back at my career and at my life, and the only times where I can say I regret something, it's when I did not trust my instincts.
Mm.
It's when I let others influence me. It's when there are times when I wanted to try to audition for roles and I was told, I mean, and God, this thankfully isn't happening as much these days. We've been working hard at it and I know how to push past people who try to give me pushback on these issues. But I wanted to go out for roles back in the day and people would say, no, I don't think black guys could do a role like that. You know, like to be held back because of something like that is
Mm.
completely unacceptable.
Hmm.
And every instinct told me to just go forward and do this. But, you know, I listened to those voices that
Mm.
said, no, you can't for this. And I regret it. I definitely regret not having the opportunity to be as great as I can be because I allowed somebody else to prevent
Mm.
it.
Mm-mm.
Um, so I would tell anybody who is coming up in this career, stick to your guns. Find the things about this career, about your singing, about your performing that bring you joy and do it. Dive into it. Of course, fix your weaknesses, but dive into what also brings you joy within this career. But then also find what brings you joy outside of the career. I feel like so many singers don't have don't have anything really to say outside of singing because we're in the basement of an opera company all day and because you know that's all we do, we only sing, we don't I have to be so careful with my voice, why I'm not going to go out and do other things. No, you have to have substance to you, you have to find other things that bring you joy outside this business, otherwise you'll put too much onto the business itself, too much onto your voice, and you'll never be able to rise to where you need to be.
Very good advice. Well, I have been speaking on Zoom with the award winning American tenor Frederick Ballentine about his wonderful life in music. Thank you so much. What a pleasure and honor to speak with you.
Of course, thank you for having me.
Because my mouth is